Is finishing our shots in tennis important? After all, isn't the ball already gone? It leaves the string, so it doesn't really matter what the racket does. Is it maybe just deceleration of the racket? What is going on with the finish? And it makes a lot of sense. A lot of people are thinking about this. They think that, yes, I hit the ball is off my strings, and it doesn't really matter what I do afterwards. But I'm here to tell you that in actuality, the finish is one of the most important technical elements on any stroke. And here's the reason why. Yes, it is true, 100%. Once that ball leaves the string bed, we can't change the outcome of that ball anymore. But here's the thing that you have to understand. The reason why the finish is one of the most important technical elements on any stroke is because we're human beings playing tennis and not robots. Now you're probably thinking, what the heck are you talking about, Nick? Human beings versus robots? Well, hear me out. Here's what happens, for example, on the forehand, but all strokes are going to be very similar. First of all, even if we wanted to completely stop the stroke right at the moment of contact, we couldn't. So we're talking about a little bit of deceleration. So if I hit this forehand really hard and I try to stop at contact, you see that the racket actually ends up coming this way a little bit. So I'm unable to stop it right at contact because of all this acceleration that's built up. So this is true. A little bit of the finish is deceleration. But the reason why I bring up human beings is the following. When we strike a tennis ball, there is a delay between our intention and our muscle executing the action. And for that reason, the finish is one of the most important parts of any stroke. So how does this delay between our intention and the muscle executing the action work? Well, I'm going to again use the forehand as an example. I have to give myself the intention to finish as far as I can possibly go in order to have the maximum amount of acceleration around the contact zone. So if I intend to not finish all the way, here's what will naturally happen to the stroke. If I hit the forehand really hard, the racket will naturally decelerate and it'll go somewhere around here. And that is how some players will play the ball at times. But on the bread and butter shots, on 99% of all strokes, players have an intention, and the intention is to finish all the way. So when you as a recreational player intend to finish a stroke all the way, here's what will happen. Let's say on this forehand, I'm going to try to finish as far as I possibly can. Now this allows me to have the maximum amount of acceleration around the contact. In other words, my mind is free. The racket will not slow down anywhere around here in order for it to stop sooner. So again, we're talking about the delay between our intention and the muscle executing our action. So if we weren't intending to go all the way, let's say we intend to go here, here's what will happen to this delay. We will start slowing down the stroke prior to the contact, and we won't have maximum acceleration. By us intending to go all the way, this is the only way to get the maximum amount of acceleration around the contact. But guys, that's not it. That's why the finish in tennis is so magical, because not only can we get the maximum amount of acceleration, but we can also determine how we're going to play the ball. So just think of Rafa and then think of somebody like a Del Potro, two completely different forehands and two completely different finishes. So if we intend to go very high on our finish, now there's more of a likelihood that we're going to have a more steep racket path after we hit the ball. On the other hand, if we intend to go a little bit lower in our trajectory, now there's more of a likelihood that we're going to have a flat stroke. So here I'm going to go extremely low. I'm going to go from one waist to the other, and let's see what happens to this forehand. You see here the ball is extremely flat. So guys, here's the thing that I want you to understand. It doesn't really matter where you finish. This has to match your style of play. It has to match your genetic predispositions. It has to match the type of player that you are. For example, I like to finish right above my shoulder. This is my style. Now I'm going to tell you one little weakness on my forehand is often what happens to me when I'm a little bit tight, and you can see this sometimes when I play points, is that I finish somewhere around here. Like my racket doesn't always go all the way back. This is somewhat that similar to how players used to play back in the 80s, early 90s. Some players used to finish their forehands here. And when I'm playing really well, I tend to finish my forehand a lot further. And this is something that I teach. I don't want players to interrupt their finish. So How you finish doesn't matter. Whether you're going like, even like Rafa, I don't have a problem with that. Or even if you go like Monfils around the waist, I don't have a problem with that either. But what I do have a problem with is something that I'm correcting on my own forehand, is not finishing at all and going somewhere around here. And this will interrupt your torso rotation. This will abruptly shorten the stroke. It will not only rob you of power, but also of control. Now, when we're talking about topspin, the complexity lies in what happens shortly after the moment of contact. So obviously, if we're going up, we're going to get topspin. And what I teach is something that's very simple. I don't teach the method that Monfils employs, Sloane Stevenson, even Federer at times, where players are kind of whipping the racket like this and it goes around the waist. I find this very difficult for recreational players to adapt. Juniors have a little bit of an easier time with it. So my method to create topspin is to go the old school way. You're going to try to be as vertical as possible, and you're going to let that racket come over your shoulder or around your elbow. This is the zone where I want your finish to be on the forehand, from the elbow to the shoulder. This is the easiest, the cleanest way to hit a forehand. There's many high-level players that hit it like that. This is a finish that feels really good, and it's very comfortable, especially at the recreational level. And yes, it can result in more topspin, but again, with topspin, it's a very complicated subject. If you want to know in detail what differentiates between a flat topspin forehand and a heavy topspin forehand, check out my video on that subject. Now, the forehand is the most complex shot when it comes to the finish. The other shots are a little bit more easy, especially when we talk about the two-handed backhand and the one-handed backhand. The one-handed backhand needs to have a finish that goes at least above your shoulder when we talk about your hand. So you want to be able to go up, because on the one-handed backhand there's limitations because the arm can't bend backwards. So we can't go up and then down like this, like we can on the forehand. Some players do this, and this is actually a flaw on the backhand. It's a mistake. So what you want to do on the one-handed backhand, you want to go up and have your hand go above the level of your dominant shoulder. On the two-handed backhand, a simple tip, I tell people to hit themselves in the back like this and get both elbows up. So when we talk about the forehand, many variations possible in the finish. When we talk about both the one and the two-handed backhand, you have to make sure that you're going from low to high. Now, of course, finishes can also depend on what type of ball you're hitting. So of course, there's going to be some times where everything what I just said will be reversed, and you'll hit a forehand going high to low, or you'll hit a forehand going straight across the body. This will depend on the situation you're in, your location in the court, and also the height of the ball, and many other things. But I'm talking more about the bread and butter shots. The thing that I want you to remember from today's lesson: a lot of people don't put enough effort and attention on the finish. To me, it's one of the most important things. And I'm going to say it again. It doesn't matter how you finish, but it matters that you finish all the way. Here's how you have to finish. On the forehand, you have to finish as far as you possibly can so that your chest is pointed towards the other side fence. That is the maximum amount of finish that you can get on a forehand, and that's what I want you to achieve. It's not possible on every single forehand. There's going to be some circumstances where you can't rotate and finish that much, but I want you to get that type of finish as often as possible. The takeaway from today's video is the following. I want you to understand that we as human beings have some disadvantages. We're not robots, right? The racket is moving in the air at tremendous speed, sometimes at 100 miles an hour, so we can't really control it that much. So we're at the mercy of physics, and our intention to do something is accompanied with a delay. So what that means when it comes to the finish on any shot is the following. It doesn't matter how you finish, but it's unbelievably important to intend to finish every single time on every single shot. I said intention to finish all shots. Whether you're actually going to get to finish your shots, that's probably not going to happen. So what I mean by that is you're going to intend to finish your shots, but sometimes, especially in emergency situations, when you have very little time, when you are in a defensive situation in the court, you might not be able to finish your shots, and that's perfectly okay. That's part of the game, and those type of shots will come out intuitively, but your intention has to be to always finish. Now, when I'm talking about shots, I'm referring to ground strokes, forehands, backhands, slices. When we're talking about volleys, obviously on the volley, the finish is going to be completely different. It's a deflective shot, and actually on the serve, the finish is quite intuitive, very different from the ground strokes. If you want to know in great detail why the finish on the serve is more intuitive, you can check it out on my app.